Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Timeless Movie Podcast, episode number 167. My name is Victor Vasquez. Appreciate you joining me on this episode and this channel where all we do is discuss new movies. New movies that come out in theaters or in streaming. We'll go non-spoiler first, give you some high-level thoughts, then we'll switch it over to spoilers, dive in a little bit deeper, and then at the end of the podcast, we decide, is this movie that I just watched, is it timeless? Is it something that I can see myself rewatching in the future various different times or even owning myself in digital or physical media? Now, everybody's going to have their own opinions. Sometimes you'll agree or disagree with me. Well, if you do either or, feel free to voice those opinions with me on social media like Threads, Instagram, and Blue Sky. On all of those platforms, you can search up Timeless Movie Podcast, and I would be happy to hear you guys' messages, your own opinions and thoughts. That way we can interact about any movies that we've recently seen. And speaking of movies that we've recently seen, episode 166 of the Timeless Movie Podcast is out now. And on that episode, I ended up talking all about Rian Johnson's newest film, Wake Up Dead Man, the third film in the Knives Out universe. So on platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you listen, go look up episode 166 of the Timeless Movie Podcast. That way you can hear my opinion on Knives Out, Wake Up Dead Man. All right, now let's get into this week's movie in which we are talking about, which is kind of crazy, another Netflix film. This one is actually directed by Noah Baumbach, and it is called J. Kelly. I had really heard a couple of good things, mixed things about this movie. I believe it came out in a lot of different types of festivals, but as soon as I heard the cast, I was really intrigued. You have George Clooney, Adam Sandler, Laura Dern, just to name a few. And so I really wanted to kind of get a feel for how would this film play out, how funny or interesting would it be from a drama perspective? Because again, you have such a legend in Adam Sandler who always comes out in funny movies. And you also have George Clooney, who I can't even remember the last film that I've seen him in. And so that was really the biggest reason why I wanted to check it out. I unfortunately couldn't see this one in theaters, so I had to wait for it on Netflix. But now that we got to watch it, let's go ahead now and move over to the non-spoiler section. That way we can talk a little bit more about what my thoughts are on J. Kelly. Okay, J. Kelly is directed by Noah Baumbach. If you are not aware, he has made prior films like Marriage Story, The Merowitz Stories, Frances Ha, The Squid and the Whale. He's made so many different types of stories and films, and he sometimes he has had Adam Sandler back. He works with Greta Gerwig a lot, who also appears in this movie. But apart from Greta Gerwig, there's also a couple names that I've already mentioned: George Clooney, Adam Sandler, Laura Dern. You have Stacy Keach. You have Patrick Wilson. You have Isla Fisher. You have so many different types of actors. Billy Crudup, don't want to forget him. He has a small part to play in this film as well. There's so many great actors, a couple of awesome performances that you see in this film. But what is J. Kelly about? Well, let me tell you. J. Kelly is essentially the story of an actor by the same name as the title, J. Kelly. J. Kelly is played by George Clooney. And when you get to meet him, he's actually wrapping up one of his most recent films, performing a specific scene. And, everything seems like it's going well. He's got a lot of people around him 24/7, his agent, his publicist, his makeup artist, a lot of people just following him around. But after a specific altercation that happens to J. Kelly, the day after, he just decides to up and leave and go to Europe. And his whole entourage follows with him. And they're all kind of wondering, well, why did he just decide to go and leave and abandon his next movie project? And during the trip to Europe, you start finding out a little bit more about J. Kelly, about the challenges that he's faced. And then you get to the essence of the question for J. Kelly is, did he make the right decision to become an actor? Did he make the right decision to really, at the sacrifice of his family and friends, to reach this level of fame? And so that's really what the film is trying to portray in J. Kelly. Now that I got to check it out, overall, I thought this movie was good. It has very, these themes that we've seen before, or at least, not maybe exactly the same, but to a specific type of essence. There's the theme of, a very famous person or a rich person, when they start looking back at their lives, they start looking back at memories. then they start kind of contemplating, did I make the right decision? Did I do what I needed to do to make myself happy? Or should I have focused on my family more or my friends? And so again, not a news story per se. It's just coming from the perspective of an actor, which maybe, with the various movies that have come out throughout the history of movies, really, there probably is something like this as well. But again, it's a very familiar story, but I really enjoyed it. The emotion worked for me. There was a lot of, again, great performances from not only Adam Sandler and Laura Dern and George Clooney, but some of the other actors that come out as well. And again, the overall message of that kind of decision point for Jay Kelly is, did I make the right call? It also feels kind of like a cautionary tale in a way. And I'll kind of get to that a little bit later. But overall, I thought it was a good movie. It didn't blow me away. The performances obviously did really kind of captivate me, and I got to feel a little of that emotion of what was going through Jake Kelly's mind and the conflict that he had. But let me go into some positives and negatives. That way, you have a little bit more sense as to what my full thoughts are on this movie. Okay, first positive that I want to call out for Jay Kelly, and I want to apologize right now to everybody listening, because if you listen to prior episodes, I bring this pro and positive up a lot. I'm not trying to do it on purpose or anything, but I'm just a sucker for it. But really, my first positive is the camera movement in this film. I don't know what it is about the way that some cameras move around certain characters, certain scenes, and what they're trying to have you focus on or not focus on. But in Jay Kelly, there's a couple of really awesome sort of like one shots where you have the camera start in a soundstage. It starts on one part of the soundstage, and then it just moves very freely around the soundstage. And what you're seeing is everybody that's kind of helping Jay Kelly produce this movie. You have assistants, you have cameramen, you have the people holding the boom mics, you have Ron, who is played by Adam Sandler, who is Jay Kelly's agent. You have all of these different types of characters. And what's so cool is that as the camera's slowly moving around the soundstage, you pick up on dialogue, you pick up on characters and what they're talking about. Sometimes it has nothing to do with what is going on in the specific scene. It's just random conversations. But I actually really appreciated that. I thought it's clever to kind of have the audience pick up on all of those little details, because maybe something might be important. Maybe something might be telling us or foreshadowing to us about what the story might be about. And it also happens in a separate scene later on in the film. There's a moment in Europe where Jay Kelly and his group and entourage are on the train, and the camera does something very similar where it goes from the back of the train to the front of the train, and you just hear random conversations. And it also opens up for those conversations and dialogue moments to have funny lines, to just say something that hilarious that has nothing to do with what Jay Kelly is experiencing, but they just drop a little line here and there. And then, so I really enjoyed, again, the way that the camera was just so free to move around certain scenes, because again, it added to making it feel like a play, and also added to the comedy aspect of the situation that they were in. Second positive that I had about Jay Kelly was I actually dug the flashbacks that they set up for Jay Kelly's character. So, like I mentioned in the synopsis, essentially this film kind of deals with Jay Kelly going back and looking at his life and seeing these key moments that happened to him. His first audition, one of his first meetings with his ex-wife, just different moments that he experiences, and also with his daughters. And it's just him kind of recapturing that feeling and trying to see, like, well, what did I do right or wrong? And the way they did it was, again, they didn't de-age George Clooney. They had a separate actor, a younger actor, play George Clooney. And again, I always really enjoy when movies don't have to do the de-aging thing, because again, it becomes a distraction. So here, they actually got Charlie Rowe, who is the actor's name, that played a younger Jay Kelly. And I thought he did a good job, and I really enjoyed how they just had Jay Kelly be in the flashback. So it's almost like, again, it's a play. He's watching his younger self reenact what had happened from a memory. Sometimes he's miming the words, and he's like remembering either the joy or the pain that he gave to his family or to his friends. So the way that they kind of brought in and kind of slotted in those flashbacks was, to me, I thought, a really cool aspect to the movie. Last but not least, final positive is the ending. I thought it was really clever how they kind of set it up. Again, I'm going to keep it very vague, so I know that it's not really good for you guys to understand why it's a pro. But to me, I thought it landed, at least as I thought about it more. When I first watched it, I'm like, oh, okay, that's it. But then the more and more I thought about the movie after I stopped watching it, the more I understood why they did that kind of an ending. And again, it kind of just circles back to what I was mentioning at the beginning of the non spoiler section, which is the messaging of this movie, which is how precious life is and how we really only get one shot. And so, again, just circling back to that moment, to me, the ending kind of just really closes that loop on it and leaves at least the audience what it's supposed to be is how you should really not take life for granted. You should try to cherish moments with friends and family. And yes, there's going to be hard times, but you always try to find a way to just be connected with the people that you love. So I really like that. It might be a hit or miss with some people. So again, let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with me on the feeling that you got from the ending of Jake Kelly. All right, let me move on to some cons, some negatives. Again, these aren't going to be something huge or significant, but first one I have is I did feel that the movie was just a little bit long. Not too much. It didn't drag in a lot of areas, but at 2 hours and 12 minutes, I actually felt like there could have been a couple of scenes that were could have been cut out. There's moments where the story actually it's so focused on Jay Kelly that you actually have breaks from him and you're following Ron, who's played by Adam Sandler, or you're following Liz, who is Jay Kelly's publicist, and Liz is played by Laura Dern. Those scenes are still really well done, well acted. The emotion is captivating. But I did feel like there could have been stuff that, maybe just could have been edited and just cut down a little bit more just to make it more focused on Jay Kelly since this is his story. But again, just in my personal opinion, I felt it was just a little too long and some scenes could have maybe been cut. Second little nitpick and con that I had about Jay Kelly was and this is going to really contradict one of my pros, which is the ending. But I did feel like there was a lot of aspects to Jay Kelly's life that were kind of left unresolved. I understand why they would do it in that kind of nature because really the ending is supposed to leave you with the feeling of, hey, you only live once. In essence, that's kind of like what it's trying to tell you. And so I don't know. There's things that Jay Kelly goes through with his family, with friends, with former friends, and I don't know. I would have liked to see more of like an epilogue for Jake to like really see him trying to change. He notices those things. He notices the pain that he's really delivered to other people around him, and how much other people, like his entourage, has really given up their lives to make it work for him. And I wanted to see a little bit more from Jake Kelly. I wanted to see him specifically not only understand that he's really cost a lot of his friends and family members, cost a lot of their lives in a way of like from an emotional perspective. But I don't know, something of seeing him recognize and then what am I going to do to work towards that? Uh, I know that probably doesn't make any sense, and that's not what the movie's trying to do. But just something that I noticed doesn't ruin the experience at all for me. Okay, next segment that I want to move into now that we've talked about some very high level thoughts is should you check this movie out on Netflix? This film is already available. If you have a Netflix subscription, you can watch it now. But the question is, should you immediately go watch it this weekend or this upcoming week if you have some free time? My opinion, I say that this is a good watch. Check this one out, but it's not immediate. It's not something that's gonna like, yeah, you need to check this out. Like if I think back to like Wake Up Dead Man, great example. If both are on Netflix, both on the home screen, I would much rather people watch Wake Up Dead Man. I just had a better time with that one. But there's still great things about Jay Kelly. The performances, there's a lot of emotion that goes into what some of the characters are facing. And, just the idea of the messaging again. It's how do you deal with the challenges that you may have had to do to sacrifice in order to achieve something great? Was it worth it? There's a lot of things like that I think can become relatable, even though obviously not all of us are going to be actors. But really, in essence, we all have some of those key decision points on things that we choose to do in our lives. And, it's somewhat relatable in some aspects. So that's going to be my recommendation. It's definitely a good watch. Not something that you have to immediately drop everything and watch now. But if you have the time over the holiday break, might be something you want to check out. All right, those are all of my thoughts from a non-spoiler perspective of Jay Kelly. let's now dive in to the spoiler section of this podcast. That way we can start talking a little bit more about whether we think it's timeless, why it is or why it isn't. But before we do that, want to give you guys the warning. Please jump out of the video now, jump out of the podcast if you do not want to be spoiled about Jake Kelly. We won't spoil the entire movie, but we'll talk about certain details in order to make sense of like what I'm trying to describe about why I liked and didn't like some aspects. Hopefully that gave you enough time. This is now going to be full spoilers all the way up ahead for Jake Kelly. All right. First question we have to answer in regards to Jake Kelly. Is this film timeless? Is it something that I can see myself, Victor Vasquez, today want to rewatch in the future? Although the idea and the concept of how life is just hard and we don't get multiple chances at it, although that theme and that concept is definitely timeless, I will say that Jake Kelly, the film, is not going to be timeless for me. I still had a good time. I enjoyed watching it. The biggest reason I think I feel like I don't have the need to kind of go back to it is I feel like after watching it once, I kind of absorbed everything I needed to about the movie. I absorbed how the relationships that Jake Kelly faced with Ron, with Liz, how he just struggled to have a relationship with his daughters because he wanted to reach for greatness. He wanted to be a beloved actor. And so, to me, watching it again, I don't know if I would get as much out of it as I did the first time. So that's going to be really the only reason why I feel like I don't think it's timeless today. And again, this is just my opinion. This is not me saying that the movie is bad at all. No. Again, listen back a couple more minutes. In the earlier part of the podcast, I said that this was a good movie. There's a lot of great things that I do want to call out right now, but just as of today and how I feel about it, a couple days after watching it, I will say that Jake Kelly is not timeless. However, couple of things that I want to say about what I enjoyed in this movie. Favorite performance is gonna be Adam Sandler as Ron. Ron is Jake Kelly's, he's his everything really, but he's mostly his agent. And just the way that he kind of interacts with Jake Kelly, making sure that he's happy with everything that he's being given in regards to his roles or different types of tribute shows. Ron is really just the all around good guy. And I'm gonna be honest. Maybe one of the other reasons why I sometimes feel like a challenge of like deciding if it's timeless or not is who I'm rooting for. And I felt like I was actually rooting more for Ron because of how hard it was to kind of make sure to keep Jake Kelly happy. All of the different types of, changes and adapted situations that Ron had to really set up. And so, to me, I was always rooting for Ron. I wanted to make sure that he was being respected. And he also had the best emotional moments between both Liz and Jake Kelly. The scene with Jake Kelly it sucked because it's essentially a breakup. You have Jake Kelly going and kind of spiraling out in a way because he feels like he has not had a relationship with his daughters. And so just to kind of spoil a little bit more, the whole reason that Jake Kelly goes to Europe is because he wants to follow his 18-year-old daughter or daughter that's about to graduate because he wants to spend more time with her because up until this point, he has not had a chance to do that. And he wants to really kind of, right some wrongs because his older daughter, Jess, who's now in her 30s, never got to have a relationship with her at all. And so he kind of wants to make sure that he has some moments with his daughter, Daisy, who is graduating high school. That's also the reason he goes to Europe. And so Ron has to really go through a lot to be able to sacrifice not only seeing his family, but going to Europe, making sure all the tribute items that they're going to give to Jake Kelly are situated. And it's just a lot. And then there's this one moment in the third act where Jake Kelly just at one point says, you know what? I don't think we should work together. I'm obviously paraphrasing, but they just have a big dispute where Ron basically challenges Jake Kelly and says, hey man, I've been working with you for so many years and I feel like I'm not getting back what I'm giving you. Like I want us to be friends. And I don't feel like I'm getting that same feeling reciprocated. And Jake Kelly says, hey, you're my agent. Well, we're not friends. You're taking 15% of what I make. So how does that work? How do we have that kind of a relationship? And so it really sucked kind of having to see them kind of split towards the end of the movie. And then Ron has another emotional moment because in a prior life, Ron and Liz played by Laura Dern, they had a romantic relationship. And they couldn't get together because of Jake Kelly. Jake Kelly required so many things. He asked everybody to really be on call. And so whenever the phone rang and it was Jake Kelly, Liz or Ron had to be ready in order to pick up, help, and adjust things as needed. And so, again, pointing to Jake Kelly really being the cause of a lot of pain, not only for himself and his daughters, but people around him, his agent, his publicist. So those specific scenes that included Ron, I think, were some of my favorites. It's just really good stuff. And again, I could buy it when Ron was with this look on his face and the tears going down his eyes sometimes. I don't know. Just to me, it really worked. Both George Clooney and Laura Dern obviously did their parts in regards to make Ron just have that emotion play into it. And that way, me as an audience member, I really kind of just dug what Ron was doing. So Ron in this film, played by Adam Sandler, is my favorite performance. A couple other things that I wanted to note. In one of the flashbacks, you have Jake Kelly going through the forest. Again, he's crashing out at this point. He just doesn't know what he's going to do with his life. And he tries to call his older daughter, Jess. And, he calls her, and then he's in the woods. And then right when he goes through or behind a tree, all of a sudden his daughter's there. And so again, going back to like this kind of aspect of this flashback, or not a flashback, but the element and the magic of, hey, instead of having him just talk through a phone, let's have her daughter be right there and still make her voice sound like she's over the phone. And they just have a very tough and challenging conversation about how Jake Kelly still doesn't understand that he wasn't there for Jess. He wasn't there for her daughter, and instead wanted to be in movies, wanted to be great. And that scene was just, at least to me, it connected with me. I'm not saying that I have a daughter or anything like that, but just the feeling that I would get of like, man, imagine shooting for the stars and wanting to become a legendary actor, but at the sacrifice of having a daughter that doesn't want you in her life. And it was brutal. And so I really dug that scene between George Clooney and Riley Keough, who was playing Jessica in the film. But again, another great scene that I wanted to call out. And then last but not least, speaking of flashbacks, this is, I think, a good segue into it. When we would go into the flashbacks, I mentioned before that it felt like a play. It felt like Jake Kelly was rewatching these scenes in his life. And what I dug is that they did not just de-age his face. Instead, they got Charlie Rowe. And then there was this other character who I actually haven't mentioned, whose name is Tim. Tim is played by Billy Crudup. And he was actually meant to be this star because he and Jake Kelly were friends. They auditioned at the same place and they would go to acting school together. And Tim was actually the one that could really method act and get into certain characters. But at a specific audition when they were younger, Tim ended up kind of cracking under the pressure. And what does Jake Kelly do? He says, well, hey, can I get a chance to read it? And he reads the same lines and he ends up getting the part. And that's where his whole career just skyrockets. And so Jake Kelly basically turned on Tim. He took his chance. He took his life, really. And just seeing that was awesome. But again, going back to my original point, which was they did not de-age both Tim and Jake Kelly. What they did was they got two actors that looked sort of like them, like Charlie Rowe, not as much as George Clooney, but Louis Patridge, who is the actor who played young Tim, he looked exactly like Billy Crudup. I love it when they can find young actors that look like the actors that we have known for such a long time. And so having that kind of connection in the film just makes it for you as an audience member to buy in even more. Obviously, it's a little bit harder for like Charlie Rowe, who's playing George Clooney, who we've known for many, many years. But in this case, Louis Patridge playing Billy Crudup and his character of Tim as a younger actor, it works so well. So I wanted to call that out as a positive. Great job to the casting director for being able to find Louis to play a younger Tim. All right, those are all of my thoughts in regards to Jay Kelly. I know that I went through and rambled a lot in regards to, some of the aspects of the messaging or why maybe I felt like the film wasn't timeless for me. But what I always like to say is, who cares about my opinion? I want to hear from all of you. I want to hear your thoughts. Are you interested in checking out Jay Kelly? And if you have already checked it out, well, then what are your thoughts? Did you enjoy the performance of Adam Sandler playing Ron? Who was your favorite performance? And most importantly, did you think this film was timeless? All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to my full thoughts on the film Jay Kelly. My name is Victor Vasquez. This has been episode number 167 of the Timeless Movie Podcast. Make sure to check out next week's episode as we cover a new film, maybe a Netflix one, maybe not, who knows? But stick to this channel. That way you can hear my full thoughts on any new films, and we decide, after watching it once, is it timeless? All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll talk to you later.